The Boy Who Planted Tomorrow. When Daniel was 12 years old, he found a tiny seed lying on an empty sidewalk after a heavy rain. It looked ordinary, no bigger than a grain of rice, but something about it caught his attention. Instead of throwing it away, he slipped it into his pocket and carried it home. Daniel lived in a crowded city where tall buildings covered the sky and busy streets were filled with endless traffic. There were only a few small parks, and many children had never climbed a real tree. His grandmother often told him stories about the forest she had known as a child, where birds sang from sunrise to sunset, and cool rivers flowed between ancient trees. One afternoon Daniel asked, "Do you think our city could ever become that green again?" His grandmother smiled gently. "Every forest begins with a single seed." Those simple words stayed in his mind. The next morning, Daniel found an empty piece of land behind his apartment building. The ground was dry and covered with broken stones, but he dug a small hole, placed the seed inside, and carefully covered it with soil. Every day before school, he carried a bottle of water and poured a little onto the spot. His neighbors laughed. "You'll never grow anything there," one man said. "The soil is too poor," another added. Daniel simply smiled and continued watering the ground. Days passed, then weeks. Nothing appeared. Even Daniel began wondering if the seed had died. Still, he refused to stop caring for it. Finally, one bright spring morning, a tiny green shoot pushed through the soil. It was small enough to fit between two fingers, yet to Daniel it looked like the strongest plant in the world. He protected it with a small wooden fence made from old pieces of scrap wood. Whenever weeds appeared, he removed them carefully. During hot summer afternoons, he watered the young tree twice a day. As the seasons changed, the little tree slowly grew taller. Birds began visiting its branches. Butterflies landed on its leaves. Children who had once laughed at Daniel now gathered around to watch the tree grow. One girl asked, "Can I help water it tomorrow?" Daniel happily handed her the watering can. Soon more children joined. Each afternoon they took turns caring for the tree. Some planted flowers nearby, while others collected litter from the empty land. Parents noticed the changes and started bringing benches and flower pots. Before long, what had once been a forgotten corner became a peaceful neighborhood garden. 5 years later, the tree stood taller than the nearby houses. Its wide branches provided cool shade during the hottest summer days. Families gathered beneath it for picnics, students read books on the grass, and elderly neighbors enjoyed quiet conversations while birds filled the air with cheerful songs. One day the mayor visited the garden. "I've heard about this place," she said. "It has inspired many neighborhoods across the city." Daniel, now 17, smiled modestly. "We only planted one tree," he replied. "No," the mayor answered. "You planted an idea." Inspired by the success, the city launched a project encouraging schools and communities to plant thousands of trees. Volunteers worked together every weekend. Empty lots became parks, rooftops became gardens, and colorful flowers appeared along roads that had once been gray and lifeless. Years later, Daniel became an environmental scientist. He traveled to many countries, helping communities restore forests and protect nature. Whenever people asked what inspired his career, he always told them about the tiny seed he had found after the rain. "People think changing the world requires something enormous," he would say. "Sometimes it only requires taking care of one small thing every single day." One autumn afternoon, Daniel returned to his old neighborhood with his young daughter Lily. She looked up at the enormous tree, whose branches stretched proudly across the blue sky. "Did you really plant this?" she asked. "I planted the seed," Daniel replied. "But hundreds of people helped it grow." Lily searched the ground until she found a small acorn that had fallen from one of the tree's branches. "Can we plant this one too?" she asked. Daniel smiled, remembering his grandmother's words from so many years before. Together they walked to another empty corner of the city, carrying nothing more than a tiny seed, a bottle of water, and a hopeful dream. As they knelt to place the acorn into the earth, Daniel realized that the greatest gifts are not measured by money or fame. They are measured by the lives they touch and the future they create. A single act of kindness can inspire another, just as one tree can become the beginning of an entire forest. The wind gently rustled through the leaves of the great tree behind them, almost as if it were whispering a message to everyone who passed by.